Hail, hail, the Celts are here, and what the hell do we care anyway, guys? There's only so much history I think you can write in one season. Celtic were staring down the barrel of a historic ninth treble, and I think all Celtic fans were kind of, coming into this game not expecting, but like we felt that we were going to be celebrating a treble. Most fans probably felt that way than not, and sadly, obviously coming out of the final, that's not the way things have transpired. Tip of the cap, huge kudos to Aberdeen, very worthy opponent on the day. In a game that was decided by the finest of margins, both teams missed sitters in this one, ultimately decided on penalties. But coming into this game, we did a preview stream like we normally do coming into the weekend matches, and a lot of the stuff we spoke about in the preview really came home to roost in this game, and not in a good way when it comes to Celtic. In the video today, we're going to be breaking down where it all went wrong and why we didn't win this game ultimately. At any point in the video, if you do, laugh, you learn, you cry, you learn something or whatever, I don't know. Please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. We've had a fantastic 24-25 season here on the channel, and we're getting set for a summer of mad activity, whether it be transfer speculations, player report cards, end of season reports as well for the manager, the club, the transfer business, everything we've seen across this season. So if you enjoy that type of content, hit the subscribe button for more. Of course, if you do enjoy the video, hit the like button and jump into the comment section and let me know what your big takeaways, thoughts and feelings were coming out of the final. And yeah, let's just get stuck straight into this one, because let's be honest, it was far from a classic. Now, I think, the best place for me to start off with this is the team sheets, right? Now, I actually want to give Aberdeen their dues here, give them some credit, but before we come on to the different approach Aberdeen brought into this game, that really made the difference for them. It made the margins much finer in their favour, and, subsequently that's kind of how they managed to get their goal and progress through the match ultimately to penalties like they would have probably wanted at the beginning of the game. But if we wind back to the preview on Friday, I was just dead set on McKeown starting this alongside Engels and McGregor. Now, some of you guys in the comment sections were very right to point out the team that played Hibs very much felt like the warm-up, the Scottish Cup final team, as it were. And I did agree logically, like that did feel like the pattern of the squad management that Brendan had rolled out over the last couple of games. And very predictably, and not in a good way, that is what happened, and I think that this was well scouted by Aberdeen in a number of different ways. But the main reason I thought he just would not have done this is because the St Mirren game as well, similar midfield in terms of Bernardo, Engels and McGregor, it was just far too one-dimensional. Now, there is some positives for all the midfielders, I think, in this game, although very few and far between. And it was no surprise that the midfield really did struggle to break through the centre ground here, especially with Aberdeen blocking it up much more than we would have expected coming into this game as well, just based on the last couple of games they've played as well as the matches they've had against us. But the engine room, the middle of the park, the midfield is really where this game was won and lost, and I mean lost more in the case of us not being able to really control the game and make much more goal scoring opportunities for our forward players, for our strikers. Aberdeen came into this game with a totally different shape. They went with a 5 back with the same midfield three that we expected to play this game, but we did see Shinnie previously at fullback, Devlin being reinstated in here at left back with Jensen retaining his spot at right back, and then they went 2 up top with Kiskinen and Nisbet. And the first half really did feel like straight out of the preview show that we did. They were playing for those long balls, trying to get 1v1 with the striker versus any of the defenders, and trying to peel into space and try and make something happen. And really, in the first half, Aberdeen's job was to kill the first half, make it a non-event, get to half-time 0-0, everything still to play for. And as we see how the game progresses, Jimmy Tillane had a great battle plan, had a great game plan for how to use the substitutions to alter Aberdeen and really go up gears throughout the match. Whereas with Celtic, it was quite to the contrary. In the early stages, in the opening period of the match, we get found out in the most obvious way possible, where each time we try and get a winger on the ball, they're very quickly closed down, and then the spaces are not really there to play the intricate passes and make them as successful, in terms of percentages and all the rest of it, as we would want. With Kuhn, every time he was getting onto the ball on this side here, facing a wall, a crowd of red bodies with not too much support to go further and beyond and really open up some gaps here. And if the possession isn't on, the breakthrough, the penetration isn't there, we then recycle possession, get it back to McGregor, reshape, and then try and go through Taylor and Dyson and try and go down through the left. And again, this side of the pitch was just much more inept and much more stale compared to the right-hand side, just because of Bernardo's kind of range of passing. What Dyson does is a wide forward in these types of situations, and ultimately Taylor Taylor had full license to roam in this one. We've seen him at right wing again. We've seen him play a lot of midfield. We'll talk about that later on as well, of course. But we don't get that same kind of wide outlet that we do with Alistair Johnson on the right hand side. So, Celtic were very much victims of predictability, especially in the first half. Jimmy Tillane could have very easily scouted this out. Adam Ida was always, in the deep end, as it were, always had 2 or 3 bodies around him, and any chances that did come, the percentages of success are just so slim that, could he have done a little bit more to maybe influence the game and get on the ball? I think he did drop into these little pockets often enough, really. I don't think Ida is really to blame in any way, or really did let the team down, or didn't really carry his weight at all. I think he was really crowded out, and as I say, the few times where he did pop a bit deeper and try and get on the ball, some stuff happened, but then it very quickly would get snuffed out elsewhere and the ball wouldn't return to him. We did even see the likes of Scales trying to hit him directly when Scales progressed the ball over the halfway line and stuff. And ultimately, I don't think our forwards necessarily were really to blame, because when they're up against so many people, like actual, bodies everywhere, it's hard to get space. It's hard to beat all these people to the ball if the ball is absolutely perfect as coming off. It puts a lot more pressure, it puts a lot more onus on the midfield, really, more than anything. Yeah, you could maybe talk about centre-backs progressing the ball a bit more, or Taylor being a little bit more effective in these types of areas here where we see him popping up, because nothing really came from that. He did have his kind of shot, of course, in the first half that rattled off the crossbar. But really it does, as let's say, come down to the midfield. And for me, with the personnel selected, I thought Engels actually played pretty okay in this game. I don't think he was stellar. I don't think he was flying. But I think with the midfield construction, he was definitely the one of the 3 that was like we said in the preview, I'm writing the headlines today. I'm making this happen. He did play some lovely balls through. The set pieces were all pretty on point as well, which is part of his game, part of his repertoire, as it were. But with the mobility in this midfield being quite one-paced, let's say, there's no drop of the shoulder and lightning kind of strikes potential with Engels, or even really Bernardo to go and take up that space. It was too few and far between, ultimately, any good points, And it was that a little bit deja vu to the St Johnstone game? I think it maybe was a little bit, because that game in the opening bits, St Johnstone were given as good as they got, and it really wasn't until later in the first half the breakthrough comes, of course, from Carter Vickers' OG from the Engels corner or whatever. And when you get that goal before halftime, you think, right, okay, we're going to settle into a pattern here. This is going to be Groundhog Day again, and we're probably going to see the usual script unfold throughout the rest of the game. But we get to halftime, and really, it doesn't go that way ultimately. I would have thought coming out of the second half here, there would have been a bit more onus and fair enough, we're winning at this stage, so the risks and the gambles you take have to be within reason, because it is a final, and you have to kind of balance up risk and reward a lot closer, especially when you're winning. But really, in the games before, when they've been tight like this, we've broken the deadlock, and then we've went on to score a bucket full of goals. We need someone to continuously drive the attack, to drive the team forward. And I'm really looking at McGregor in big spells of this game where he was very present in and around the box and whatever, but McGregor knows better than me. I don't play football with these guys. I don't train with them every day of the week. I just watch them once or twice a week, like you guys do at home. That Bernardo isn't going to be that guy. Engels isn't really that guy. Engels wants to play the killer ball. He can see the killer ball. He can deliver it. He wants to be good in possession and make something happen. But McGregor, for me, has to be kind of grabbing the game a bit more by the scruff of the neck and telling Bernardo, you're just going to sit in the pocket and I'm going to go forth and fill the void that really is left by Hatate. This is very much a no Hatate, no party kind of situation. And without that link through the middle from midfield or the defence, however you want to think about it, into the attack, into the forward line, you are defaulted into just doing the same stuff over and over again, which is play the ball around the back, try and find some space out wide. Okay, it's not on. Maybe gamble on something, or it deflects off somebody, we get a corner maybe, or it does come through and the shot is, kind of snuffed out, or the goalkeeper collects it, that kind of stuff. Or, like I mentioned earlier, swing it back around the other side of the pitch and do it again. And like Kuhn, whenever he was 1v1 in this game, he did good. I forget what kind of main chance came from it, but he drives on the inside and scoops the ball over. I think it might even be for one of Dyson's chances that he had in and around this area here where he crashes it near post and doesn't quite make it on. But Kuhn needs assistance. He can't beat 2 or 3 guys every time. Can't beat 3 guys many times at all, actually, but 2 guys maybe the odd occasion. 1v1 is where we want to do, is where we want to get Kuhn. And that's really the whole agenda with this whole passing around the back stuff, is you're looking to, like, Aberdeen with this back five, right? Let's say the ball is on the left-hand side here with Kuhn. Devlin's going to come out with him. Noster, the other two centre-backs are just going to shuffle across a little bit, and then Jensen is going to tuck in to be like a right-back. Midfielder do the same, and they're just going to make it really hard. The theory, the strategy, the purpose of coming backwards to go forwards is that you quickly hit this space over here before these guys can adjust and do the mirror image thing of what we've just seen on the right, on the left. But the problem is whenever we're getting it into McGregor, Engels and Bernardo, none of them are... Oh, I would say Engels is, right? And Engels maybe did try this when he was on the pitch, but predominantly the way the game went as a whole, we weren't moving the ball quick enough to take advantage of those spaces. Hampden is a very big wide pitch, and we gave one too many passes to switch from left to right. It just means all these guys shuffle across a bit quicker, a bit easier, and then it means that space is gone, so you're forever coming up against a wall. We get to half time, as I say, it doesn't feel like there's any real change to try and push something else a bit forward, even if it's just committing Engels a lot higher and just getting in amongst the physicality we've got up here and just playing in and around Ida and just get the ball to Engels. Engels' hold-up play is probably way better than Ida's, to be honest with you. So could you have maybe put them together a bit more, and then Engels with his eye for a pass and all the rest of it could have maybe slid some opportunities in his way a little bit closer range, and maybe, but no, there was none of that. We came out for the second half the same as we did before. And the substitutions are where the game really then was gone for Celtic. If something did go against us, we were going to be in trouble, because on the 58th minute, they take off Kiskinen for Guy or whatever. And I was surprised to see Kiskinen leave the match. He put in good energy. He's not a striker, of course. And I think coming up against Vickers and Alistair Johnson, it was just a bit too much for him. Whereas this boy coming on, is physical, is a presence, is technically good, is pretty composed for the most part as well, and gave them a different avenue, a different problem. And that was one of the beginning... That was like the beginning of the end in terms of them getting a foothold up the pitch and making us feel a bit more pressure whenever they did come forth in attack, where we really did have to retreat quickly, a lot quicker than what we did in the first half, because this guy was just not going to be bullied the same way as Kiskinen. But not long after that, we do this, and honestly, I've gave Brendan so much praise this year, and this for me probably goes in the top 3 matches that he's dropped the ball on for us this year, if there is even 3 matches. But at 65 minutes, he does the stupid Ange Postecoglou thing where it doesn't matter the game state, the situation, whatever. Hatate and Kyogo always come off at 60, 70 minutes. And Brendan's fell into this kind of pattern recently of his squad management of 65 minutes, the cavalry comes on, or the change of first string, second string kind of thing. And when we're winning, and because it did feel very Groundhog Day-ish, I see where it came from, I get it, but it was far too premature for me. Taking Ida off for Yang, I get trying to get Yang on the pitch and have a bit more fire, someone that's going to be a bit more direct and do something here, whereas you're not going to get that same kind of thing from Dyson. You do get it from Dyson, don't get me wrong, but Dyson's much more of that kind of wide forward. He wants to be driving this way rather than driving this way, and he has been better at this recently, don't get me wrong, but it's just not his strength ultimately. His strength is this way. So by sliding him into the middle to be the mega press and then try and just get on the end of balls or whatever, and having Yang out here to maybe try and be a bit more physical, a bit more direct, a bit more vibrant, I totally get that in theory. But it's 65 minutes, it's only 1-0. I get this kind of dynamic change, right? But to also take off Nicholas Kuhn, who admittedly wasn't having a great game, okay, but equally wasn't doing bad. Forrest has already got his legend maker goal. So sentiment has to be left at home for this one, He could still come on later on. There's no urgency, I think, because once guys are subbed off, they don't come back on. And, we fell into this spot recently. Yang and Forrest almost always come on at the 65th minute. And I think that's taken 2 huge weapons out of our arsenal very early in the proceedings, especially as you know how the rest of the game unfolds. A little bit of hindsight comes into this, I think, right? But not too much, because it is 1-0. It's very, very tight. Anyone that can watch the game can see that there's not much in it, and we certainly are not free-firing, raining down shots on Mitov and causing all sorts of havoc. Far from it. And Luke McCowan has to come into the game at this point, because we need a midfielder that's going to connect the ball centrally from defence and midfield into the attack. But why he comes on for Arnie Engels, I will never know. Now, I'm going to give Bernardo his flowers here a little bit, because he does win the ball back and he has a slide tackle pass kind of thing that does set Daizen Maeda through for that one-on-one that Daizen Maeda 3 weeks ago probably finishes. Daizen Maeda 4 months ago probably squares the ball for James Forrest, but none of those things happen. The keeper saves or whatever. So Bernardo is still very physical, very feisty, and keeping the ball turning over in our favour. Because as Aberdeen start to turn the screw, as it were, here, Devlin and Jensen have got free rein to fly up and down the wing, as we see here. But in the second half, when they attack, we're seeing a lot more of Clarkson and Palaversa actually joining in on the attack. So now, in the second half, when we see Aberdeen going forward, they've actually got 5 or 6 bodies getting into our half, number one. But when we do retreat and we have gotten all the way back into the box, they've got players in a number of different positions that could cause problems. And, it's a case of all hands on deck. Everyone needs to get back. And they're making the pitch a lot bigger because we are needing to come back in further numbers. So someone like McKeown in this game state to link from front to back is much more important now. Because Guy's doing a much better job than Kiskinen of, the ball not bouncing off him, that sort of thing, as well as Nisbet. And I'd say Jensen and Devlin did a good job of flying up and down the lines. But with this central kind of pressure now coming from Clarkson and Palaversa as the game wears on, it just puts a lot more pressure on our midfield to retreat. And then there's a lot more pressure to exploit these spaces that will come out, because they're now not as deep, not as rigid, not as stifling as they were in the first half. But again, Bernardo, like I mentioned, a slide tackle passes it through for Dyson to break through in this kind of area here. He can pass well, Bernardo. I like him. He's fine. But he's at this stage, like, we need Arnie Engels to be raking those balls down the line for Yang to break through, over the top for Dyson to get one-on-one with the keeper. And without McGregor has that range of passing, but he doesn't decide to do that, like, ever, And again, I just don't think McGregor, if he's not told to do something, it's the only criticism I ever give Callum McGregor is he is too much like teacher's pet, like the coach on the pitch, where if it's not the instructions, if it's not the game plan, if it's not the battle plan, I'm not doing it. Follow the job to the T, to the letter, which has its strengths and is commendable in some ways, but in these in the trenches situations, he's got to use all of his attributes. He's got to use all of his talent to our advantage, especially when we're not at full strength in midfield. He's got to be the guy that grabs the game by the scruff of the neck a bit more and maybe just says, Bernard, like I mentioned earlier, you're covering me, I'm driving forward, I'm going to slide those balls through. And it never really comes. He's much more concerned with defensive shielding, and I get that, and it's an important thing to do. But again, is it his ultimate strength? No. So I just think it was a bit pedestrian in that regard. McKeown comes on and isn't particularly great, and I'm not trying to pure stand fanboy over him here at all, but he's the only one in the midfield that does that connectivity job, and wants to be the attacking midfielder, wants to get the shots away, wants to play the balls in, will come back and get the ball from deep, will drive through centrally and then try and make something happen. So it was good that he came on, but it was just for the wrong person. And now that Engels and Kuhn and Ida are off the pitch, and when you look at who's remaining on the bench, the kind of option to go back up that gear isn't really there if these guys don't really hit, and they don't, as you know. They make a double change where Nisbet comes off for Daba. Pardon me, a triple change. Leighton Clarkson comes off for Dante Polvara, who slides into the back three in place of the injured Dorrington, who comes off for Shayden Morris. And Shayden Morris is a player that we ID'd in the preview as being a main threat for Aberdeen, a main guy that has gave us problems and will give us problems. But with this the shape kind of stays the same, right? But Shayden Morris is now running out into these areas here. Palaversa and Shinnie are being a bit more central midfield based, but now with Guy down this side, Morris down this side with the wide players and Devlin and Jensen supporting them. They've still got those 5 players running through, but they've got like wide penetration now really on both sides, because Jensen's a handful by himself anyway, and Morris, as we know, has had a lot of joy. He's been a main player for Aberdeen, is probably the best way of putting it, with Big Daba just being a fresher version of Nisbet, potentially just another kind of target man. And with them, the shape is still 5 at the back when they've not got it or whatever, but the attack went up a gear. There's just no two ways about it. 3 minutes later, the Schmeichel own goal thing happens from a Shayden Morris cross where, we just don't have the bodies to protect out wide here. He has a pretty free cross to play into a really dangerous area. Nobody was really going to get on it or anything. It is an error by Schmeichel, and we'll talk about Schmeichel when we get to the penalties, right? I don't really hold him responsible for the goal or really want to give him any flack for it or anything like that. With goalkeepers, the currency of just football is that kind of thing is going to happen once or twice a season, and it's just pure bad fortune that for Schmeichel one of those times has been at the weekend there in the final, and it is what it is, right? But it is maybe symptomatic of something that we come to see in the penalty shootout, which we'll chat about, because it's something that I've not seen anyone else mention yet. And then once they get it to one each, they then take off Devlin for Jack McKenzie, who thankfully recovered from that assault that happened on him the other day, I should say. And again, it's just a bit more strength, because Forrest, is quick, right? But he's not lightning. And Devlin is quick and a bit more of a fullback, whereas McKenzie is a fullback, but is much more of a centre back kind of guy. And putting him next to Forrest is a much fairer fight from an Aberdeen perspective than putting Shinnie against him by himself 1v1. So with Shinnie still protecting the defence here, Palaversa is the main kind of outlet to play the wide players. Jensen's one of the only ones still kind of moving forward, but is kind of now a bit narrower and just giving us a bit more of a tougher kind of job in a lot of different areas of the centre of the pitch to again play through and get those chances one-on-one with the goalkeeper. And we get to extra time, and to be honest with you, when extra time kicks off and I'm not too confident as in our goal in extra time. I just had this feeling in the air that extra time was probably going to go to penalties. Forrest gets injured and has to come off for Johnny Kenny, and we move Dyson back out wide to wide left, with Yang coming out wide right. And this isn't a bad front three. I actually had some hope that this front three would have done something for us. And we take off Bernardo for Schlupp, and then we have a repeat of what we had. When was it? We had it recently. I forget what game it was. You guys in the chat will be able to catch me on this one. But we slide Taylor back into centre midfield to do the Rio Hatate gig, alongside McKeown. We go back to the 3 guy midfield that Brendan Rodgers seems to love. Normally it's Hatate that plays that job with the other two. And Schlupp at left back was alright, and he was just put on to stifle Morris and just make sure there was no easy balls, there was no gifts, there was no nothing coming down his side of the pitch. He was very unlucky not to be the hero on the day, and it gave me vibes of, who was our left back that scored a Scottish Cup final goal? El Karawi, or what was his name again? El Karawi? El Kadiri? Can't remember his name. Again, the chat will catch me on this one. But he almost had one of those moments himself, and it never really came off for him. And Taylor put a great shift in, it must be said. I don't think McKeown covered himself in glory, similar to McGregor. And the Aberdeen midfield, whoever was in it, was never easy for us to get around. And if you can't penetrate through the middle of the pitch, it is going to be a game like we've seen here. Very nip and tuck, not much in it. And they missed some great chances that we've not really spoke about here. The one where it bobbles to the edge of the box for, I think it was Paul Vara, who laced one, a bit of a volley. And there was another ball that gets set up for, I can't remember who it was now, maybe Palaversa or one of the defenders perhaps. It was up for a corner, maybe Jensen. But they could have actually hit the back of the net and won the game themselves. They missed out on it. But I didn't have any belief that this team was going to get another goal in the second half. We didn't have any other kind of insight into cracking through this Aberdeen shape. And this really harps back to the first time that we played Aberdeen this season, where Jimmy Tilleen had that game of two halves game plan. And I've said in the games we've played Aberdeen since then, it felt like he'd played his ace card. He'd played, his trump move or his wild card move or whatever. And we'd kind of learned our lessons from it. They hadn't really got a sniff at us again ever since. But in this game, he did really deploy that to a fantastic way, and then the game goes to penalties. And at this point, you've got to say Aberdeen, from the effort to the influence in how the game goes, stifling us. The opportunities they created, they rehearsed. They were very happy with all the chances they got. They would have liked to be more clinical in it, of course. Celtic did nothing like that. There wasn't very many chances. Yang has a chance to kind of square a ball, ends up shooting. I did want to mention this earlier. I think Yang is earned, similar to Dyson, he's earned a chance to take that shot on 1v1. But I do think Yang, 2 months ago, squares that because he's maybe a little bit less confident and is maybe still trying to prove himself, whereas now he maybe feels he's proved something and he's maybe earned that chance. I would also say he's earned that chance to take that shot. But between him and Dyson, one of them had to do better, and again, it would have been a different result. Now, I'm not a goalkeeping expert, okay, but Kasper Schmeichel was just returned from a pretty serious injury for a goalkeeper, a shoulder problem, right? I'm fairly certain it was his right shoulder that got it, okay? Now, if you think back to the OG, what arm he's trying to save the ball with, and it's ultimately not been strong enough to actually clip it out, is actually bobbled underneath, I think it was that arm. I might be wrong, so if I'm barking up the wrong tree, again, comment section, feel free to check me on this one. And if you look at the Aberdeen penalties, the first 3 of them, Kasper dives to his left every single time, and they go top, to Kasper's perspective, top right every single time. And when he gets to the last penalty, he's kind of clicked onto it. They've all went to the same place. He goes that way, but he doesn't get as high, he doesn't get as good a reach on it as he had done diving in the other direction. like I say, I'm no goalkeeping expert, but I'm going to go on a limb here and say if I was the Aberdeen goalkeeper coach or Aberdeen goalkeepers or anyone associated with Aberdeen that was thinking about that and maybe has some sort of experience of a shoulder injury to a goalkeeper, what it does to you, lack of range, restriction on mobility, reflexes, whatever. Aberdeen's penalties all felt very deliberate, that they were all going directly into the same spot, every single one of them. And when I seen that unfolding, I was thinking that is the difference in some of these situations, especially depending on what the injury is, between match fit and being totally fit. Casper, of course, was being primed to come back for this game, to have his glory, his final, and everything else that goes around it. And I don't think that this issue, if it is an issue, really did play that much of a part in the game as a whole. Maybe the OG, maybe we could chat about that in terms of, like I say, how strong that arm is or could have been. But it felt like it really played a big part in the penalties. And fair enough, Celtic and Kasper Schmeichel probably weren't expecting to go to penalties in this game, but that made me think, I wonder if that OG, imagine if Sinisalo had went for that, would he have caught it? Would he have made a better connection on it? And if it was in the penalties, we've never seen Sinisalo in penalties, it's a totally different thing as well. Of course, there's a huge psychological element, and Casper was really up for the psychological element. He was getting in everyone's ears and everyone's faces, but it felt like they just had his number. They just knew if we hit that spot, he will not get to it for maybe one reason or another. So yeah, ultimately that's everything I've got to say on the Scottish Cup final. We've got a bunch of content, like I mentioned earlier in the video, coming up on the channel in the next couple of days and weeks, which I hope to see you guys for. The comment sections on these videos is always on fire, and I'm looking forward to checking it out as well. But a game of very fine margins, very well played to Jimmy Tillene. The Aberdeen players really put everything on the line for it, and ultimately they've earned it, so fair play to them, well done, and I'm sure they're going to enjoy this victory for a while, and rightfully so. But for Celtic, this is a kind of sobering moment for some of the players that are in the squad. A lot of them have won doubles or not won all the cups or something like that, so like enough of them have got some of that heartache and heartbreak from before. But this is Callum McGregor's first final at Hampden he's lost, which you could see how much it really tore him up at the end, and that did make me want to kind of hold back a little bit and talking about, I really felt how he did let the side down. I'm just going to say it in this game by not grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck, by not reading the play, and being a rule breaker for 5 minutes, and just really causing some different issues, being the leader, being the captain, being the most creative midfielder on the pitch, being the man, and he's just not let himself do that, so this feels like it should be a real teachable moment for a lot of players in the squad to come back bigger and stronger and more determined to kind of right this wrong next year. It felt like we had a little bit of that this year in the League Cup, because last season Kilmarnock knocked us out so early in that. Losing a final is a totally different kettle of fish though, and even some of these very well decorated and legendary players that we've got at the club right now, this is a new experience for them. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing the kind of evolution that maybe comes off the back of that, in terms of the extra edge that some of these players have maybe gained as a result of this match. On screen are now some other stuff that we've made the YouTube thinks you might enjoy. I hope you enjoyed the video somehow. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, share and retweet, all that good stuff, guys. Hail, hail. Thanks again for your support this season, and Mon the Hoops.